Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program produced and funded by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I'm Jonas Holdeman. This is a show that promotes rational thinking rooted in scholarship and science and free of supernatural beliefs.
This is a call-in show, but we only have one phone line. So if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet us at FFTVKNOX. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
I never do any of those. Well, no, I don't really do any of those. Okay, well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with a discussion. The book club meets on the second Sunday, and the reflections group gets together for a potluck lunch on the fourth Sunday. Next Sunday's meeting will feature a discussion on how did our pre-human ancestors manage to become fully human, and what are the implications for current humans and their future. Now, that sounds like something I think everybody ought to be interested in, so come and join us out there. Visit our websites for additional details, including times and locations.
You know, Ralph, a couple of weeks ago, there was this, I think it was Bizarro cartoon that kind of showed a picture of God sitting in a throne, but he looks like an ape. And there's a man standing out there, and this ape God says, I did make you in my image, indeed, but then you evolved. Our main topic today is Christo-fascism. Fascism. Yeah. The three pronunciations there, and America's future. But before we take up this topic, let's look at some items in the news.
Okay, we have a couple items that should be of interest to our listeners. It seems that atheists now outnumber Christians in England and Wales, as new research into the religious beliefs of people in the UK has found that for the first time ever, those without a religion outnumber Christians, at least when it comes to the country of England and Wales. The striking thing is the clear sense of growth of no religion as a proportion of the population, said Stephen Bullivant, senior lecturer in theology and ethics at St. Mary's Catholic University in Twickenham. The main driver, he says, is people who are brought up in some religion now saying they have no religion. What we're seeing is an acceleration in the numbers of people not only not practicing their faith on a regular basis, but not even ticking the box. In other words, these people don't seem to be interested much in religion at all. The reason for that big question in the sociology of religion, added Bullivant, who analyzed data collected through the British Social Attitudes surveys over 3 decades. So the Guardian, that's the newspaper in England, pointed out that while the statement does not hold true for the entirety of UK, when Scotland and Northern Ireland are added in. When looking at England and Wales specifically, as many as 48.5% of the population stated they have no religion back in 1914. Those who belong to Christian denominations, on the other hand, made up only 43.8% of the share. So Bullivant's report stated that Anglicans and Catholics who have been brought up in their respective religions are most likely to leave the church, with 4 out of 10 adults raised as Anglicans deciding to abandon their faith. Churches need to take this kind of data very seriously, Bullivant said. I should think so. They're losing their customers, so to speak, hand over fist. When analyzing data, you see patterns that might not necessarily be noticed otherwise. This can flag up areas for further research or groups that need particular pastoral attention.
Yes, Ralph. Indeed, they should take notice. Now, England and many of the European nations don't have the separation of church and state. They have many have a church, a state church,
Yeah.
and whereas we don't. So what we see is that in that environment, people are leaving religion, and those in the United States who would like to make the point that the United States is a Christian country and to promote the ideas of religion in the law and so on,
Yeah.
need to be careful, because if they were successful, they might lose their audience as well.
Well, just adding a little bit in here, I was reading the other day that somebody's projection that within a year, just a year, that the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-E-S, in the United States are going to be the largest religious segment, so to speak. That is, they will just barely surpass the evangelicals by half a percentage point or something.
Oh, but the downside is that they never get organized.
That's
They're too independent.
That's the trouble.
Okay, the University of Miami has established a chair for the study of atheism.
Yeah.
Louis
Appignani, I think he
Appignani,
pronounces his name.
a retired businessman endowed the chair for the study of atheism, humanism, and secular ethics. With an increasing number of Americans leaving religion behind, the University of Miami received a donation in late April from a wealthy atheist to endow what it says is the nation's first academic chair for the study of atheism, humanism, and secular ethics. Hurrah, hurrah.
Yeah.
The chair has been established after years of discussion with a $2.2 million donation from the Louis J.
Appignani.
A retired businessman and former president and chairman of the modeling school Barbizon International, who has given grants to many humanist and secular causes, though this is his largest so far. The university, which has not yet publicly announced the new chair, will appoint a committee of faculty members to conduct search for a scholar to fill the position. Mr.
Appignani.
said he rejected a last-minute proposal from the dean to call it a chair in philosophical naturalism. Instead, he and university leaders worked out the title, broadening the scope to include humanism and secular ethics. I'm not trying to eliminate discrimination against atheists, said Mr.
Appignani.
who is 83 and lives in Florida. So this is a step in that direction to make atheism legitimate. Religion departments and professors of religious studies are a standard feature in most colleges and universities, many originally founded by ministers and churches. The study of atheism and secularism is only now starting to emerge as an accepted academic field, scholars say, with its own journal, conferences, course offerings, and now an endowed chair.
Yeah, who would have thunk it, huh? I mean, we've talked about this, decrease in religious identification before, people leaving churches. It doesn't mean they're all saying they're atheists or agnostics. They just don't care that much, I think, which is far different from the years when we were growing up and were raised, I'm sure. But it's coming into conflict with what I see as an increasing almost militarism in the religious sector that's starting to feel a little panicked about this. And so that leads us into our discussion today, what we call Christofascism and the future of America. Now, someone once wrote that when fascism comes to America, it will come wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. In other words, it will be jingoism for Jesus. Now, ordinarily, politics is one subject that we don't address much on this program, but because religion has become so infused into the political process these days, we feel that we have to talk a little bit about this growing symbiosis between religious fundamentalism and fascism. Fascism is a term that gets thrown around a lot, but it's not necessarily well understood, probably because it doesn't really have a central dogma like communism or Christianity. But the historian Robert Paxton, who's probably the world's preeminent scholar on the subject of how countries turn fascist, has given the following definition, which I will try to read verbatim here so I don't muck it up. He says, fascism is a system of political authority and social order intended to reinforce the unity, energy, and purity of communities in which liberal democracy stands accused of producing division and decline.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Doesn't that sound very familiar? He makes the point that fascism only grows in the soil, disturbed soil of a mature democracy. A democracy in crisis, though. A good summary of his work can be found on the internet if you want to look by a lady named Sarah Robinson.
In light of this definition, let's look just at what has been happening in American politics over the past 7 or 8 years. When Obama was first elected in 2008, the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate said his first priority would be to work to deny Obama a second term. There was no mention of fixing the crumbling infrastructure, how to deal with a burgeoning health crisis, or a strategy for successfully exiting Iraq. The Republican position was just to say no to every initiative that the administration proposed without offering alternatives. The essence of a pluralistic society, representative democracies like ours, is the art of compromise. When one side of a political spectrum insists that it is only their views that should prevail in toto, we shall see cracks forming in the political system.
Yeah.
Now, this we're going to bring up the term dominionism in a little while, but this is one of the central unifying characteristics of dominionism, that they want to have only their particular views, and I suppose there are enough different views within the group that each one wants only their group to be given primacy in discussions.
That's probably what would eventuate. I mean, we've seen this in the fragmentation of the Protestant movement, right, where you have hundreds of sects, you know, from just an initial split with the Roman Catholic Church. Dominionism, we weren't going to discuss that in real detail. We'll do that sometime, maybe how it got started. But it's basically the concept that religious people, in particular Christian people, should dominate every aspect of life. That is, from education to commerce to government, that they should rule, basically, over the rest of the people in every aspect of life.
Yeah, well, Ralph, the term goes back to biblical reference in Genesis, where it says God gave man dominion over, it lists the fowls of the air and the fish of the sea and plants and everything that moves on the surface of the earth. And this, there are two aspects of this. What does dominion mean? There are two kind of different meanings. What does dominion mean? And the idea of extending this idea not just to living creatures and so on, but to, as you just mentioned, to all aspects of life and institutions and so on.
Just speaking of this, quote came to my mind. I don't know why I have it floating around in my head from my teen years, but the end of Edgar Allan Poe's The Masque of the Red Death is a sentence that says, and darkness, decay, and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. And these dominionists want to hold illimitable dominion over all.
Just to comment on the two interpretations of that
Yeah.
biblical. One means a stronger control over everything, domination. But there's another interpretation that refers to stewardship, that man should care for all of these aspects of the earth and life on it and our institutions. And that's quite different from what we see the thrust on the far right.
And we have seen some of the fundamentalist, I won't say real fundamentalist religions, but some probably the more liberal religions starting to take global warming to heart and really say, well, we have the obligation, to save the earth, to exercise dominion in the second sense that you pointed out. Interesting. Anyhow, we talk about trying to, say, more or less form these cracks in government. And one of the most striking examples that we have is when the Republicans gained control of the House of Representatives in 2010, they subsequently voted over 50 times to rescind the Affordable Care Act when they knew it could not pass the Senate and would be vetoed even if it did. And this was a simply childish show of petulance, taking up far too much time that should have been used for addressing other problems, or even amending the Affordable Care Act to their liking. It's a prime example of democracy that's heading for a crisis, when the people who are supposed to be governing the democracy simply want to shut it down if they don't get their own way. Another example has been the unwillingness of the Republican Senate to even consider a hearing on President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland to fill the Supreme Court vacancy left by Antonin Scalia. His nomination, that is Garland's, is one that's been cited by Republicans in the past as a worthy appointee. But because it's Obama's choice, they will not carry out their constitutional obligations. Okay. All right. Well, we have a phone call here, so let's see. Hello, caller. You are on Freethought Forum. Do you have can you give us a name or a nickname?
It's Charles from Central Illinois.
Hello,
Hey,
Charles.
Good to hear from you.
Yeah, today's question is the United States actually united?
Yeah. What do you think about that?
No, we are not. We've got multiple different divisions, starting with race, and moving on into different forms of sexism, different religious divisions, both between different religions and within each religion, that being sectarian.
Yeah.
And we've got vast differences in culture between, say, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, and the entire West Coast. But we are united in some ways. We all have listened to the same languages on the radio, pretty much.
Yeah.
And we all watch basically the same news on the TV and so forth.
Yeah.
Although a lot of it's pulp.
Yeah. So we seem to be united, so far as information that gets around, like you say, TV, radio, although it can be very selective. We're united still politically, but you are absolutely right that basically, so far as the culture goes, we seem to have a lot of little diverse pockets.
Joe Bornhart has on this forum a number of times said that often people have much more in common than they recognize. For instance, if you look at the humanist, manifesto or statement of humanist principles, there's probably most of those principles anyone,
Yeah.
any moral person would agree with. But instead, so much is made of the differences rather than these commonalities, and that's what's disappeared. It's become kind of unpatriotic to talk in terms of commonalities rather than differences.
Yeah. So.
I believe that's where we're beginning to divide up in political segments in many regards.
Yes. Yes.
I was watching some of the libertarian stuff on C-SPAN, and they keep wanting to get rid of minimum wage and lower the taxes on the wealthy so they'll spread their wealth out more. And I'm still looking for that trickle down effect from Ronald Reagan this year.
Yeah. It didn't exactly trickle down to most of the middle class, did it, Charles?
Another aspect of fascism, that kind of a worship of personalities. In this case, Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Even though their politics have changed considerably from what Reagan was proposing.
Yes.
Yes.
And even I hate to harp on this subject, but Reagan was the first president to really dig into deficit spending. I mean, of course, dollar wasn't as inflated then as it is now, but he had the first really large deficit in the budget in the country, and yet the conservatives keep referring back to him as their patron saint.
Yeah,
the cognitive discontinence, or however it's pronounced.
Yeah.
They're kind of like the five blind men and the elephant,
Right.
as far as I can tell.
Right.
In some regards.
Yeah.
I don't see much hope either on the Democratic side, when one of the primary principal leading candidates for president is kowtowing a lot to, seems to be the bankers in Wall Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's one thing we'll have to say for Bernie Sanders is that he really does seem to want to rein them in. It's a little hard. I think it's a little naive to think that you can just go and do this very easily, but nevertheless, I think most of us think something ought to be done along those lines. We have these 5 big banks that nearly ruined the country with the housing crisis, and nobody has ever been held accountable for that failure.
No. And it's not only that, but they were the money changers for the bloody, some of them were the money changers for the bloody drug cartels, and they were even convicted of it, and they spent no time in jail. They didn't get any of their money taken from them.
No.
They still have all their governmental contracts, even though by law they're not supposed to. The Congress and the Senate gave them exceptions. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Okay. Well, Charles, it's been good to hear from you, and keep calling in. We enjoyed talking to you.
okay.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right, well, we just made mention of the fact that the Senate won't confirm Obama's choice for a Supreme Court vacancy, but Donald Trump came out with a whole list of people that he would nominate for judges for the Supreme Court. And that includes one William H. Pryor, whom the Lambda Legal Foundation, which is a group that defends gay rights, etc., described as repeatedly showing clear hostility to the rights of lesbians, gay, bisexuals, transgenders, those with HIV, and also to women, people of color, disabled people, and others. If they're right, he hasn't missed a whole lot of the groups who are real minorities in this country. Pryor argued in favor of upholding a Texas law criminalizing consensual LGBT sex. He compared it to polygamy, incest, pedophilia, prostitution, and adultery, and argued that states should be free to prosecute gay people as criminals. This is kind of scary that Trump would put up a guy like this. In light of these comments, we should not forget that gay people were one of the major targets included in the Nazi Holocaust. This doesn't come out very often, but they, some 50,000 people apparently were sentenced to concentration camps under the Nazi regime. So I think that here we see another just little inkling here from this judge's statement and the fact that he could be appointed to the Supreme Court, that we have this symbiosis between the religious right and this fascist ideas or fascist ideology.
We've also seen the political right time and time again march up to the point of crisis by threatening a refusal to increase the debt ceiling and thereby shutting down the government. They were only deterred by the specter of the shutdown that occurred under Newt Gingrich as Speaker of the House.
Okay, well, we've got another call here. We better get on. Okay. Hello, caller. You've reached FFTV. Do you have a name or a nickname?
Yes, my name is Sebastian. How are you gentlemen today?
Well, we're doing pretty well, Sebastian. Would you like to?
Right.
You have a question, comment?
Yeah, I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. I know we were kind of talking about the LGBT community, and I think one of the subtitles here is the future of America.
Yeah.
How do you guys see it playing out with, I guess, mainstream Christianity in the United States and the LGBT community? Do you think that they will continue to condemn them? And I think, if they do that, they're really going to shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, I don't really see a way forward to continue to condemn that.
Yeah.
That's just not a popular way. Or do you think that that'll kind of die off and there'll be a more tolerant version of Christianity to survive?
Well, I think we have to be a little careful about what mainstream Christianity is.
Sure.
If we use
Sure.
I guess what we used to call mainstream Christianity, still do, are sort of the traditional Protestant churches, Methodists, Presbyterians, maybe Episcopalians. Some of them are very welcoming to people. Some of them have had splits within their own churches over this. I think those people, for the most part, will eventually, come to accept the situation. I don't know about the people whom I would call real biblical fundamentalists, what many call evangelicals today. I don't know whether I think they'll fight hard, but eventually I think that be one of those things like racial equality, that once you get over these initial pains of acceptance, that it will sort of disappear into the background. It's not that there isn't still racism, but it's a lot less than it was when Jonas and I were little kids. So what do you think about Sebastian's question about this?
Well, there's the idea that familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
Contempt in the sense of not being worthy of consideration or discussion and so on. So it could be that as the sexual movement moves along, that many of the issues that are so striking today may disappear, but I think even just like treatment of race and treatment of women and so on, although there's a lot of profession of liberality there, underneath there's a current that always has the potential to pop up. And
Yeah. Well, I think religious fundamentalists, so far as I'm concerned, are absolutely obsessed with sex. And it doesn't matter whether it's between gay people or between straight people. That just seems to form such a large part of their concerns to what people are doing in the country. I mean, abortion isn't necessarily sex. It's a little different. People on both sides of the aisle feel differently about that. But there are a lot of fundamentalists who don't even want to consider birth control as a viable alternative for women. So I just see this to be kind of crazy that sex drives a lot of this dialogue when it seems to me it's of really no big interest, except the people who are doing it.
Kind of hard position to take up, to be anti-sex.
Yeah.
That's hard to carry on for very long. I'm surprised it's lasted for so long. But I kind of agree with what you guys have said.
Yeah.
Makes pretty good sense. I can see, the condemnation of the LGBT community as, I guess, maybe being the death of maybe fundamentalism. I guess the more liberal Christianity seems to just roll with this punch and go. But
Yeah.
I guess if fundamentalism can take a hit, that's one step towards. Once you start thinking things aren't as literal, there's room to move. You can talk with someone who's not a fundamentalist up down.
Yeah, as soon as you learn not to fear them. Let me ask you, Sebastian, have you called us before?
I had not called before. This is actually my first time watching the program.
Oh, it's the first time. Are you local?
I am. I'm in Knoxville, yes.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, you might enjoy coming over to Barley's this evening after the show. And
Well, I'm still working this evening.
Oh, thank goodness someone's working.
keep the country running.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for calling in.
Yep.
And
Thanks for your thoughts, gentlemen.
sure, and please do again if you get a chance.
Okay, so we were talking about the refusal to increase the debt ceiling and shutting down the government, and they were only deterred by the specter of a shutdown that occurred under Newt Gingrich as Speaker of the House, and the Republican image suffered severely for this act. This continual flirting with creating crises has been promoted by a small group of Tea Party activists who seem to be primarily led by Ted Cruz, the former candidate for the Republican presidential nomination. We'll come back to Ted Cruz's religious fundamentalism in just a little bit.
Right. But now it's time for our mid-program break.
Oh,
So we want
So-
to identify our sponsors.
I'll read your great script here. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the Community Access Television here in Knoxville. You can also see us streaming online, live, outside the Knoxville area. You just go to ctvknox.org, and you'll have the opportunity to click on view the current programming and watch what is
Sure.
happening here.
Sure. This is a call-in show, and we're live today, May 31st. And viewers can call now to the number on the screen or tweet to us at FFTVKNOX.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community camaraderie and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in East Tennessee area.
Yeah. Well, I think we want to run our little promo now for our sponsors. So we will get
We don't have Sam here today.
We
have
don't
Forrest
Sam,
taking over that.
We have Forrest. So,
If you live in
Well,
or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious
Okay,
beliefs or
well,
simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalist of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs, or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for
okay.
Oh, boy, that was a real drama going on here.
Sorry for the little contretemps, folks, but we
And the rescue of the staff who came in here and
Yeah.
got things straightened out.
have to. Lee Faithful Forrest is our producer today, and he is taking over for Sam. And it's a little bit complicated to run this whole thing. I must tell you that there are lots of dials and switches and clicks that you have to go through. In any case, the Rationalist of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and a discussion of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month we get together for the book club. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone.
Okay.
And now back to our program.
So what we were discussing was Christofascism and the future of America, as you can see on the screen. Well, we don't have a democracy in a full-blown crisis, certainly, but we do have the disturbed soil where Paxton says fascism can grow. Professor Paxton describes 5 stages of the recognizable process by which democracies turn fascist. The first is always rooted in the promise of restoring lost national pride by resurrecting the culture's traditional myths and values and purging society of the toxic influence of outsiders and intellectuals who are blamed for their current misery. So I think everybody by now has probably noticed that the rallying cry of Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee for president, is what? Make America great again. And who's to blame that America is no longer great? Well, for decades, the political right has blamed the liberals. So what have liberals done that's so bad? They fought for separation of church and state, for equal rights for racial and ethnic minorities, for women, for secularists, now for the LGBT community. They've promoted science rather than superstition, and reason rather than unjustified belief in how the world works. In other words, they have opposed the religious rights efforts to turn America into a compartmentalized and socially stratified theocracy, based on the myth that somehow these liberating influences have destroyed a more glorious past. And as Paxton notes, this perceived decline is also caused by outsiders, which is why Trump has captured the enthusiasm of many Americans by promising to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico and proposing all Muslims be excluded from entering the country. All of this raises the specter of Hitler promising to restore the glory of Germany following the failure of the Weimar Republic and the demonization of the mentally retarded, the homosexuals, and the non-Aryans, particularly the Jews.
In the second stage, fascist movements turn into real political parties. They seize their seat at the table of power. In every case, Paxton cites, the political base came from rural, less educated parts of the country. This is what we have seen in the emergence of the Tea Party, which is largely rooted in the South. In this stage, hate groups tend to arise and may become extremist local goon squads. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which keeps track of such groups, currently lists 892 of them. I think that we see in the South, the civil rights laws came along and outlawed racial segregation and imposed legal restraints on what one person could do to another.
Right.
I remember at the time, it was the philosophy was espoused, I don't know how frequently, but get people to behave in a certain way, and then they will start accepting that particular approach.
Yeah. But as we mentioned before, there is still lingering racism, certainly.
Yeah, so what happened in the South, although on the surface the colored-only signs were removed, white-only signs were removed, still the vestiges of that persisted under the surface. A particular concern is the move of some states to create militias for God. The Mississippi Church Protection Act, which was signed into law in March, would allow churches to empower designated members of their congregation as part of a security team with a shoot-to-kill authority equivalent to a police officer, but with less government oversight. The bill contains few restrictions regarding where one may act within this capacity or how they may act, allowing churches' volunteer security personnel to exercise this authority in public and private venues outside of the church. The Secular Coalition for America notes that this act could constitute an unprecedented and dangerous step. Belonging to a church should not afford anyone the same rights and protections as law enforcement. This legislation emboldens extremists by creating a legal means for radical preachers to enlist their congregations into God's army. Well, you know, there's complaints about these Muslim imams and so on urging their
Yeah, trying to radicalize their
Yeah.
congregations.
But we see the other side of the coin here, where ministers may be encouraged to do the same thing.
Yeah,
Christian ministers.
yeah. This is part of the paranoia that seems to be pervading Christian fundamentalism right now, that they are being persecuted. And of course, the killings in South Carolina, where the fellow went into the church and just shot 7 people, I think, killed 7 people, have just fueled the flames of that paranoia. It was terrible thing, of course, but once you start letting local groups form their own little private militias, then you are getting near to what Paxton calls, these extremist local goon squads. So are we seeing the tip of the iceberg here? Is this movement going to continue and grow, or is this just kind of a one at a time or two at a time thing? I don't know.
Yeah, one of the dangers with the growth of fascism is that you bring in a lot of people who share, say, a common theme, but also have a lot of disparate beliefs. And so for a while they're successful, but pretty soon you get infighting, and you don't know what's going to emerge out of all of this. So that's the real danger, in that things are unpredictable. Could be for good or could be for bad.
As I say, in Germany, the Weimar Republic was a failure. It was what people considered failed democracy that had to be replaced. I think the first time Hitler ran for Reichskanzler, he only got 3% of the votes. But eventually he ended up getting, the majority. And so these movements can grow either from very small kernels, if you get enough people excited about them.
But that's kind of a common theme that we have seen, that when you depose an authoritarian figure, it creates kind of one might say a vacuum, but really a stew of different
different people competing for it, and it doesn't necessarily has to be fascism. It doesn't. I remember, I keep having this in my head, we often refer to the Soviets as the Bolsheviks, but actually when the Tsar came down, they were the smaller party. Bolshoi means big in Russian, and Menche means small. So the communists there were the Mensheviks. But once they got power, even though they were the minority, then they started calling themselves the Bolsheviks, so that it would appear that they were the mainstream there.
Kind of reminds one of Orwell's Animal Farm.
Yeah. Okay, we have another call here. Caller, you've reached Freethought Forum. Do you have a question or comment?
Hi, my name is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
I'm calling to talk about the big rally that's going on in D.C. this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm an atheist. I live here in Knoxville, and I think it's really important that we get out and just show the nation our numbers, because a lot of people think that we're such a small minority.
Yeah, I think you're right. Are you going to the rally?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's great.
This is the Reason Rally in Washington, D.C. that we're referring to.
And I think somebody told me they were expecting as many as 50,000 people. Does that?
I sure hope so. I want America to see that we're not just some small minority that they can push around. It's time that they start to show us the same respect that they showed some of these other minority groups. I mean, there's more atheists and non-theists in the United States than there are Jewish communities.
Oh, yeah.
The politicians bend over backwards to take care of the Jewish community. I, for one, am tired of it.
Well, we are too. But, you know, sometimes, what is they used to say, to get a mule's attention, you have to hit him over the head, you know.
With a 2x4.
With a 2x4. And I think the politicians maybe haven't been hit over the head with that 2x4 enough. They don't really seem to recognize that this is becoming a very large voting bloc in this country.
I agree.
Yeah. So, have you watched our program before, Ryan?
I have. I enjoy the show. I'm a member of theirs too.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to make sure with this topic of America being united and talking about different groups that are subsets that anyone who's thinking about it might have talked themselves out of going this weekend. It's a very important opportunity for us as non-believers to show the people of America that we're here, and that we're not going to be quiet anymore.
I know several people from RET who are going. I unfortunately cannot go, but several of our members are going, and I assume some members from ASK may be going also.
Absolutely.
So
anyway, I just wanted to make sure that the word got out for anyone who might not have heard about it.
You know,
encourage as many people who can go to go and let your face be seen.
I wanted to mention that, do you know who a fellow named Ray Comfort is?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's an Australian preacher there. He was talking about trying to hand out $25,000 worth of gift certificates to atheists or something of the sort. And I think the police have told him to just stay away and don't make trouble.
Yeah, I don't think he realizes what he's up against when it comes to, you know, our people are normally pretty educated when it comes to society and the laws these days, and he's barking up the wrong tree if he starts to try to hint something to me.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Okay, well, thanks very much for calling in, Ryan. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you for giving your time to the show.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, tell us about the third stage towards
the third
fascist
stage for fascism. Okay. Paxson says the third stage towards the fascist state occurs when an institutional partnership forms between the conservative elites and the country's brown shirt hordes. Now, we don't have really brown shirt hordes yet, but as we said, when you start giving guns and forming little local militias, and you have all these hate groups that are spread around, you start to worry a little bit. I mean, these hate groups may not have many people in each one individually, but you know, somebody gets mad, somebody starts shooting, it could incite quite a bit of turmoil within the country. So we're not there yet, but we do have to consider the following facts. The Tea Party movement was created from groups like the Army's Freedom Works and Tim Phillips' Americans for Prosperity, with massive media help from Fox News.
And I remember there was a John Birch Society that goes back even further than that.
The John Birch Society goes back even further than that. And we've seen Army's own professionally produced field manual that carefully instructs conservative goon squads in the fine art of disrupting the democratic governing process. Once the country gets to stage 3, it is probably too late to turn back. Speaking about goon squads, I can remember in the Bush-Gore election, when we had all this problem down in Broward County, that the right wing, I think some of these may have been our Army's people, went down and started to raise a lot of fuss, basically bully the people who were counting the ballots. And I thought that that was a very scary moment. So how can you tell if you're near the danger line in this third stage? Number one, are the neo or proto-fascists becoming rooted as parties that represent major interests and feelings and wield major influence on the political scenes? Well, we've seen how the Tea Party has become disruptive and uncontrollable in the House of Representatives.
Is the economic or constitutional system in a state of blockage apparently insoluble by existing authorities?
Yeah.
Are we seeing right now how Donald Trump's candidacy is being fueled largely by people's perception that the government is stagnant, ineffectual, and ignoring the average American.
Yeah.
Certainly that ineffectuality was created by, to a large extent, the efforts of the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, people have got what they elected.
Yeah.
Is a rapid political mobilization threatening to escape the control of traditional elites to the point where they would be tempted to look for tough helpers in order to stay in charge? This hasn't happened completely yet, although we have seen some motion towards this situation in the formation of the Tea Party. But we have to be aware that Trump's candidacy has been a sucker punch to conservative elites. Trump has wrested control from them. A few months ago, a special edition of the National Review features essays by the traditional elites of the conservative movement arguing why Trump should not be the Republican nominee. According to Billy Crystal, the conservative elites are toying with the idea of a third-party movement. So far, however, there seems to be no movement towards strong arming to keep power.
Yeah. During the debates for the contenders for the Republican nomination, it was astonishing to see how many claimed God told them to run for president. They basically wanted to steer America into the direction of a theocracy. Yet the news media completely neglected this story. They were obviously too timid to even mention how central the dominionist theme is in the conservative movement. And candidates like Scott Walker, Ben Carson, Rick Perry, Mike Huckabee, Mark Rubio, John Kasich, they all declared that they have a message from God and affirmed they would govern according to their religious principles. So we don't have time to go into all the details here, but we just have to say that if God was really telling these people to run, he's either a very bad campaign manager or else he's just a joker. I mean, that, he kind of abandoned them once they got their feet all in the water and jumped in one by one, just sort of took off. And you can read what statements that some of these people made, but...
Do they really believe that, or was it all...
I think, you take a guy like Ben Carson, I think he's dumb. Here's a guy, I think Joseph built the pyramids to store grain. Besides the fact Joseph is a fictional character, who would build a monument like a pyramid to store grain? Tons and tons of limestone.
Solid rock.
Yeah. So anyhow, we've only got about a minute to go, so we have to wrap up this show. We could have talked a lot more about this and religious influence, but not today. So get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, programmed by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
Yeah, you can see this show most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. We thank today Lee and Jonas, my co-host here, for technical help, and all the staff at CTVKNOX today. They had to do a yeoman's job. So we'll see you next week.